recording.
All right, here we go. Zac, my man, thanks for hopping on the podcast today. Yeah.
Oh, man, so good. So good to be with you.
Yeah, dude. First guest in the new season. You definitely
an honor.
Deserve that honor. Yeah. What's been going on with you to start off the semester?
Oh man, we're in the thick of fall, and our oldest is now a second grader. So we're living that elementary dad life of drop off and pick up. And then our youngest is a kindergartner. So he's finishing up his preschool goes through kindergarten.
Okay.
So he's big dog on campus. So our baby is big dog, and apparently he's hilarious at school. And I think by the time this one comes out, we are just finishing up a big travel run with our LifeWay Students travel team. So I am about to, at the time of listen for this, about to really enjoy a holiday season. That's a chance to write, reflect, and kind of get excited for 2023. It's been a whirlwind of a year. I think the last that we talked, we were in the thick of figuring out what we were going to do as kind of our LifeWay Students training team. We now have the rhythm, and we are living into it, and it's been really good, man. So it's been a really good season. We've had a really great family summer after a busy spring and a work fall. So I'm ready for the holidays, man. I'm ready.
Yeah, dude, awesome. Yeah, I love seeing your pictures from over the summer. You all had a good time.
It's really doing it, man. Kicking it. We're kicking it.
Heck yeah. All right. So for this episode, we're talking about taking notice of how we should approach apathy in that's a long time topic that you can always talk about. And there are a few ingredients in the mix right now that give this topic some nuance from how it might have been discussed a few years ago, but we'll get to those. First things first, man. For people who are watching and listening, what's some evergreen advice? What are some patented methods that are tried and true on how to deal with apathy in students who are in youth ministry?
So I think the question of apathy that gets asked in student ministry specifically relates to feeling like they're either not there or they're not engaged. I think that's kind of the cover word, the cover ring of like, man, my kids that used to be here aren't here, or the kids that are here don't seem to give a flip or a rip while they're here. The first thing I would tell any youth minister is before you get mad, before you get upset, check their motivation. Like there's a little bit of homework that you need to do beyond just the like, oh, they hated that game, or they didn't like my lesson. Like it may not be a you thing. There's probably a motivation thing for them to dig down a little bit deeper, because students by nature, like I think even more so now than other seasons that we'll talk about in one of the other questions, they kind of just, they don't have the like manners is the wrong word, but the willingness to fake it, right? Well, sometimes when we say that students are authentic, that means that they're real, like whatever the cost, right? Like we might have said like a generation or two ago, people would like, they could suck it up and just be like, oh, it's fine. Good job, Pastor Jeff. That was all right. And now it's like, nah, man, that was lame, bro. And you're like, oh, what? Oh, was it me? And so it becomes that like internalized, like it's a me problem, but it may be a motivation problem for them. So I would say work really hard to not make this like an us and them, that they're apathetic, that you're excited, but to do the empathy check of like, what's actually going on. So wife is an educator. Karen's been teaching high school for over 15 years. Whenever she has an apathetic student, she told me to relay this to your listeners. She tries to figure out in the other areas of their life that are observable, what are the things that might actually stoke the passion, right? Like, so it's one of those like, they don't care about math, but like, do they love chess club, or they come alive in like jazz band or football? So if that's true, it's related to the subject area, not to like the course of their life. If they're apathetic always, there's probably something else going on, right? Like there is like some trouble at home, some like trauma buried deep, or some like a inability to like socialize or cope or do, like something else is going on that has nothing to do with your lesson, pastor, and maybe not so much to do with your game. And so I think doing some of the like the homework that way probably really important. So that would say check the motivation before you get mad. That's one of the evergreen advices I would give. The second thing is to mix it up, because that's a way for you to do some internal like observational stuff, right? Like if you have like the formula that's like, they come in, we play a game, we sing 3 songs, I talk, we sing, we leave, like that's predictable. So they're going to have a like predictable behavior. But if you mix it up in a way that's different, you're going to get to see them in different moments where maybe like the game took more time because it was really like physical or active, or maybe it was a quick lesson into a song into a more active thing, or maybe instead of you talking at them, there was some like, depending on the room and the size of the group, some like group or team or table activity that like fed the conversation or discussion instead of like lecture first. Maybe it was like feedback first, lecture later kind of thing. And so I think there's some ways to like stir the pot to see like what resonates and what works. Like just hammering whatever your formula is home only like reinforces what you love and engages you. And so it's going to stretch you. So like, that's one of the things, like to check their motivation and also be willing to be stretched to try a few different things. Because I think sometimes we get stuck, right? Like I just keep doing it and it doesn't work. It's like, well, you keep doing it. That's why it's not working.
Yes, exactly. No, I love that, dude. Those are good things to hit. I think definitely there's some fluctuations with middle school and high school. And I think, something that I know several of us who are watching and listening, and you and I for sure have heard, especially with middle schoolers, has always been, man, just changing it up a little bit. Like if they walk in and all the chairs are gone, they're like, what's going on?
What's happened? Yeah.
Or you switch the order or something. Like that alone is going to achieve kind of the every 7-minute effect that people talk about, of how to change up things with students in a message to engage them, and that's really good. And as far as the internalizing, that's always a struggle, whether you're a small group leader, whether you're up front teaching or leading worship. You're trying to measure how you're doing as well as how they're receiving it. But if one of those has to win out, it's almost always going to be reflecting on yourself and saying, how am I performing? And that's when it goes into like a vain area of like, I need to perform better. And then that cuts you off from what you just said, like being able to make sure all these students and my volunteer leaders are walking in the door with something, and I probably don't know what it is. And that's going to affect the lens that they see everything through, what they hear, how they apply it, especially because, just like how words today are so important, because with a lot of important words, everyone has a different definition of them. So if you read a tweet, if you read a comment, even if you say something that's in a script for your large group teaching or small group teaching, it's always important to define those words, because that's going to get everyone on the same page. Like being aware of how you're coming across and then what they're walking in with. Those are variables that are always going to be different. Even if your program is static, the variables are the people, and the variables are the most important part of ministry because it's for people. So,
well, and I think what you're picking at, man, like that's when we say community, it's what you just shared. Like when you say that your youth ministry isn't a youth group, it isn't a program, it's a community, or we care about community. What you're saying is that every kid that walks in there has a chance to reshape a little bit of how the room is, right? Like you may have, dude, there was a season in ministry where we had a crop of nerds, and everything was a little nerdier, and that's just what it was. There was a season in ministry where we had the whole show choir, because show choir captain was best friends with one of our other girls, and they move in herds. They came together, and so like we had a really artsy season of ministry where like it was not weird to have lip sync battles that were like full on like awesome competitions because they were all really talented. But that's just the nature of the community and the group. And moving the chairs around, or like there's Play-Doh at the table, like that may be like, I would never think of that, or like that seems so small, but it's huge because it's disruptive in a way that's really helpful. And I think that's the thing that you shared also, is that engagement is the measure of our willingness to like stretch ourselves to connect with them, instead of like a performance of like, how did they like what I did? Like it may not be your best talk, but you brought in other elements that allowed you to get to the heart of them. And that's worth it, other than you feeling polished about your notes. Right. And I think that's like, if the heart of what we do is to care about teaching, informing, and discipling, then you have to be humble enough to like shave a few minutes off of the time that you got to talk, or be willing enough to make the Walmart run to pick up a few art supplies to connect with the parable in a way that was both visual and auditory.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. Love that. So let's get to the two elements that make handling this topic right now a bit more complex. So obviously,
ramp it up. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah,
let's go. One of them is everyone knows about it, probably tired of hearing about it, but it's going to affect us for the rest of our lives. A post-COVID world, right?
COVID hit.
It's
COVID
taken
hit. Whenever COVID hit.
Whatever COVID, all the COVID stuff.
It's always a hit. Like COVID punches, man. It punches back.
Dude, it kicks you in the back. It's hard. And that's for a lot of ministries, it's taken a lot more time than people thought to kind of regain footing on what's normal ministry now. But the other element, which people watching and listening, you haven't experienced unless you've been around ministry for a long time, and that's a generational rotation. So this is the first semester for Generation Alpha as sixth graders in youth ministry. And I remember, like, I had millennials, the youngest millennials, going into Gen Z. And then as a youth pastor, I fell one semester short of seeing the Gen Z to Gen Alpha turnover. Like I'm still a sub teacher, but like not as just as a pure youth worker. And that is a whole new frontier. So, Zac, how do these two elements affect our approach in dealing with apathy that maybe we wouldn't think of even a year or two ago?
Man, so the number one thing as we're kind of formulating thoughts around this next new generation is that life has always given them a screen to interact with the world. That they've always had access to a screen that would interact with a larger world. There's probably at least two schools of thought on that. One is to embrace it and to make sure that for every moment that you might be considering teaching the room of them in person, to have some kind of accompanying like video, interactive, screen-based element, whether it's a game or the video, like 1 minute short, or some kind of engaging thing, or reel or TikTok or short or whatever. So that you embrace it and you find ways to incorporate, implement, and extend. Like that's the part that I'm most curious about, are ways to extend what would be traditional youth ministry programming or happening through screens, right? So like your talk was shorter, that's fine. You've been sharing little videos all week long, right? Like you spent that time educating so that like maybe the time that you had them in the room was inspiring or encouraging, or vice versa. I don't know. So you can embrace it, or I think you can find ways to exclude it, to create safe zones from it. Because one of the other stats that we've got from at least the younger Gen Z, maybe Gen Alpha, again, too young to really know, is that some of them are feeling addicted to it, or even like held in bondage or hostage to it. So if church is a safe zone, if youth ministry, if our corporate gathered time is a safe zone from the technology, that might be a welcomed respite. It's probably a little bit of both, but I do think there needs to be some real thoughtfulness about the ways in which we are embracing it. And man, it's part of our strategy. We're doing digital things alongside our analog meetings, but there is got to also be a welcomed, like, man, like we don't do the phone thing here. And that's a benefit from you and me. We think this time is precious. We don't want to be distracted by other things. And I think, and this is the thing that I would want to underline both with, we communicate that clearly to them, like we involve them in the strategy. And I think that is something that's very different than how we've done youth ministry before, where it was like, oh, you didn't even know we were doing it and it happened. Like we invite them into the, like, when we gather on Sunday nights, man, we're just gonna do phone-free zone, youth pastor included. We're all gonna phone-free and we're gonna celebrate that we're all here in the room together, and then we'll check up with the rest of the world later on. Instead of being like, hey guys, we don't need our phones. Well, why don't we need our phone? We don't need them. Like invite them into it, talk about it. Like I think that's some of the things that, at least for some of the other folks that I've been in conversation with, to not overlook how informed they are by other sources, that we would like protect them from like the truth of why we're trying to get at why we're getting at. Like, not like we want you back next week. It's not a sales pitch of like we want you back. It's really good for us to gather weekly, because that's how we foster more and more communication. It's honest talk. It's genuine talk. And like, you may already do it, but I would encourage you to lean into it even more, because students this age, this season, like, this is not the thing where it's like you're going to explain it to them later. I would encourage you to explain it along the way.
Yeah. No, that's great, dude. It's not just giving them instructions to follow, it's giving them a vision to participate in.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely. The bigger picture, and
the bigger
saying
picture.
the bigger picture over and over again. Like, it's not, hey, don't interrupt the person talking in the front. It's, hey, like, it's not just the nice thing to do. It's this is the way we want to communicate. We want to, time for questions at the end. Like, explain the run of the thing. So
yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think that applies to both those elements, because obviously you're right with COVID and everything went online, and how do we now account for the online element, but also the in-person element. And of course, biologically speaking, we were made for in-person conversation. I remember talking with someone on my staff who's a parent, and they went to their kids' open house, and this is junior high or high school, I think maybe high school. And in this teacher's class, every time they come in the class, every day, they spend the first 5 minutes having face-to-face conversations with other students sitting around them. No phones, no anything. And for a while, it's really awkward, but then they eventually get to do it, because students don't know how to do that anymore. They're just all about screens. And they're like, why would I want to, like, I have to talk to this person who's next to me? Like, why can't I just like read my iPad while you're teaching and whatever? Right. Like, and
it's not a big deal. You're just up there, I'm down here. And I'm
right.
Like, it feels rude. Like, at home I do it. I have TV on and I play on my screen, which youth pastor, by the way, you second screen too. I've seen you have football on and check fantasy football scores on your phone. You're doing it. You're just not doing it at a church environment, which is your work environment. But for them, it's one more place to be in a different environment. Like,
no, yeah.
They both have couches. It's confusing. Right.
Yeah, no, it's really important to like emphasize, hey, the in-person time is great. If for some reason you can only plug in online, like, we want to include you, but we want you to get here in person as soon as you can to experience this. And I love that idea of taking a technology break, even if it's only like every other week or once a month, where you do like a big special thing, like really showing students that teaching them how to engage in person is so important, not just for your lesson in the youth community, but for life. It's going to be a huge skill.
So Jeff, that's one thing I have given this talk at a couple different conferences. That's one that like sometimes comes up or whatever, but for the youth ministry planner who's listening to this, and it's like, okay, but like, what do I program? What do I do? It's a tidbit. I don't know if it's fully tested. It's just a hypothesis. I want others to test and report back. I think the future of some youth ministry events may be far less entertainment, right? Like, come ride the mechanical bull, come play laser tag in the parking lot. And it may be more experiential, which is come have a quiet break, freedom from phone and distractions. Like, it may be a little more like introspective than it was like sheer entertainment, because entertainment everywhere else is so high stakes and so excellent. It's hard for any youth pastor to keep up with massively multiplayer online role-playing games, or to keep up with how entertaining like the latest shows and TV. Like, it's hard for us to do that. What's not hard for us to do is to be really present and relational if we're willing to commit to it.
Yeah. No, I love that, dude. I love that. Well, Zac, this has been awesome, man. Real quick, what are some ways that people can keep up with you and connect with you online?
Man, I would love, again, so test some hypothesis. I need, so my role at LifeWay Students is the student ministry specialist. So you can follow at Zac Workun or at LifeWay Students. Primarily, Instagram is a great place to send us DMs. I'll share with Jeff the text line at the bottom. You can actually text directly to our team. But I serve in a role that I want to learn from those that are doing student ministries. I am a student of student ministry. And so I'm here to report the findings and also to learn and hear from you. So if you're trying out things, fellow youth ministry mavericks, I want to hear about it. So Instagram's great. I'll share the text line. Email, you can always hit up Zac, ZAC at youthministrybooster.com. That's a great way to inbox me for things. And just the things that are happening in your ministry, would love to hear about it. Because I think that's one of the things that's exciting for us in ministry is the collaborative spirit that is much more prevalent now and much more accessible now because of the things in the age that we live in.
Yeah. No, I love that, dude. Yeah, I'll have all that info in the show notes as well. And if we have any of the resources where people can look for how to find ways to fight apathy in students, I'll tag those in as well. Well, yeah, bro, thanks so much for joining me again.
Yeah.
Glad to have you on as my first guest, and I'll be praying for
You're
you
back.
as you continue kicking butt for student ministry and the kingdom with LifeWay. Thanks again, bro.
Big fan of youth ministers, youth ministry leaders, and you, my friend. Thanks, Jeff.